Hi, I'm Charles Daring on behalf of Bearwood.com, and today I'm going to show you a very simple way to determine what size hands you need on your clock. All you have to do is measure from the middle of your clock, and now this is somewhat of a standard, but you are not held to a certain size. It's whatever you ideally want, but as a standard you'll measure from the middle of the clock to either touching the number, on top of the number, or just to the other side of the number. For my purposes, we're going to go to the middle of the number. And as you can see, that's about 4.5 inches. So it's as simple as that. I just go to Bearwood.com, look for 4.5 inch hands, and there we go. Now we are talking about the minute hand. The minute hand is what has to be 4.5 inches on this particular clock. Now on some of the clock hand styles, the pivot point of the hand will sit here, but it may still have a little bit sticking out here. You don't have to worry about that, as long as you get the desired length you want in relation to that number there. You don't necessarily have to go all the way over to the hour mark there. But again, it is the minute hand you are concentrating on the length of when looking for clock hands. We're going to talk about how to choose which movement you would like for your clock. Now we know this one is going to be too short because the threaded portion is clearly under 3/4 of an inch. The threaded portion is meant to go through the wood, and then you put the hour, minute, and potentially the second hand on this area right here. So we know this one's not going to be long enough. And let's check this one here. It's got a good thread length, and we're going to measure it and see if it'll go through 3/4 of an inch. And it's right at 3/4 of an inch. So this would be the one we're going to use. Now that being said, if you want to embed this clock movement into the back of your piece with either chisels or a router, that will also make a difference. You would only need to know the thickness that's between the front of this movement and the front of the clock, because if you were to router into the back of this, then it would obviously not be 3/4 inch thick. So that's something to take in mind if you so choose to make an area for this to fall into on the back. Now earlier we talked about clock hands. Now when it comes to hand sizes, if you go over a certain amount, you will need high torque movements in order to make that work so it doesn't strain the mechanism and the movement. Now we're going to install this movement. Now I have not routed out an area on the back of this clock to do this, so it would be sitting behind the clock, but it's very simple. Let me show you how we do it. And it will come with a hanging mechanism. That's what we're going to be attaching everything to, because there will be a nut that holds it in place, which will look like this. That's all there is to that one. Now all we have to do is put on the hour hand to the 12 o'clock position. Then we'll put on the minute hand, also in the 12 o'clock position. Now you don't necessarily have to have a second hand, but if you do want one, it will simply go into the hole on the top of that mechanism. I need to put this little nut on here first, and that will keep everything into place. Now we're going to put on the second hand, and that's just a matter of stabbing this little pin into the end of it. And it's as simple as that. Now these hands can be flexible because they are made of such thin material, so take care when using them, but then use the portion on the back with the little spinning wheel, and that is how you will set your time. You put a battery in there and you're ready to go. Now some clock movements will have a little cap that you can screw on to the end of it, and that kind of dresses it up as well. Now with second hands, that's not always possible because they go into the top there and cover up the threads. But this particular movement I'm holding, it's designed to have that little cap on there. But one thing I would like to mention is we talked earlier about the thickness of your clock face. Now, if you're repairing a clock or building a clock from scratch, you can also get clock faces of many different styles and thicknesses and materials on bearwood.com, and that tells you right there how thin that piece is. So this is not the correct movement necessarily for this because I don't have a material to show you with, but the thickness of that clock face, that does factor into the length of the threads you will need for your clock, because we spoke earlier about the thickness of the clock.